Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves waking up not in our comfy beds, but in ancient Thebes. Imagine the sun, a fiery orb, slowly pushing its way over the horizon, painting the mud-brick houses in hues of orange and rose. The air thick with the smell of the Nile, of baking bread, and well, let's just say sanitation wasn't exactly a priority back then. You hear the bleating of goats, the rhythmic thump of a potter's wheel, and the insistent buzzing of flies, a constant reminder that life, even in a pharaoh's city, isn't always glamorous. And speaking of pharaohs, try not to accidentally bump into one. Their guards are notoriously cranky, and your chances of explaining yourself in hieroglyphics are, shall we say, slim. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know your city and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slowly peel your eyes open. Dust motes dance in the single ray of sunlight piercing the gloom of your small, windowless room. Actually, room might be a generous term. It's more like a glorified storage space, attached to a larger house where, hopefully, someone knows who you are and why you're sleeping there. You push yourself up, the rough linen of your tunic scratching against your skin. No Egyptian cotton for you, buddy. Thebes, in its prime, was a magnificent city, the religious capital of Egypt for a significant chunk of its history, particularly during the New Kingdom. Think grand temples, towering obelisks, and enough gold to make a dragon blush. Historians still argue whether Thebes was always the political capital as well, or if that title bounced between here and Memphis, depending on the ruling dynasty's whims. You shuffle to the doorway, stepping carefully to avoid the resident scarab beetle who seems intent on making this threshold its permanent home. Out in the courtyard, the household is already stirring. A woman, likely the homeowner, is grinding grain with a stone mortar, her movements rhythmic and practiced. A young boy is chasing a skinny cat, both screeching with equal enthusiasm. And someone, somewhere, is definitely burning incense, probably to appease the gods or mask some less than pleasant smells. The air hangs heavy, pregnant with the promise of another scorching day. Remember that tunic? Yeah, you're already regretting it. You try to remember how you even got to Thebes. Was it the boat trip down the Nile? You recall the sun glinting off the water, the constant chatter of the crew, and the distinct feeling of being seasick despite being on a river. You shudder. Maybe stick to solid ground for a while. Fun fact, the Nile wasn't just a convenient highway. It was also considered a god, happy, and Egyptians made offerings to ensure its continued bounty. You spot a water jug near the well. It's probably not filtered, pasteurized, or even particularly clean, but your throat is parched. You take a tentative sip and yep, tastes like river. Still, it's wet. You'll live. Maybe. Now might be a good time to pray to Tauret, the goddess of childbirth and protection, because you are going to need the protection to survive the day. You decide to venture out into the streets. The sun is climbing higher, turning the sand a blinding white. The streets are narrow and winding, a maze of mud-brick houses and bustling marketplaces. People are everywhere, merchants hawking their wares, laborers carrying heavy loads, priests hurrying to temples, and kids playing games in the dust. You try not to make eye contact with anyone, mostly because you don't speak the language and your attempts at mimicking hieroglyphs only resulted in confused stares. You pass a stall piled high with dates, figs, and pomegranates. Your stomach rumbles. But you also recall what happened last time you ate street food from an unfamiliar vendor. Let's just say the pyramids weren't the only thing you visited. So you resist the temptation. Perhaps, the only thing standing between you and your colon is self-control. As you navigate the crowded marketplace, you notice a group of scribes diligently writing on papyrus scrolls. They are probably documenting everything from tax records to religious texts. These guys were the rock stars of the ancient world, literate, powerful, and probably responsible for the world's first bureaucratic nightmares. Historians still argue whether the scribes wielded genuine political influence, or were simply well-paid functionaries. You overhear snippets of conversations in a language you don't understand, but you catch a few familiar words: Pharaoh, Anubis, beer. Beer! Now there's an idea. The ancient Egyptians were definitely into their beer. It was a staple food, a form of payment, and possibly the reason half the population had a permanent hangover. Suddenly, a commotion erupts nearby. A man is being dragged away by guards, protesting loudly. You don't know what he did, but you're pretty sure it wasn't good. Best to stay out of it. You remember reading somewhere that justice in ancient Egypt could be swift, and occasionally involved crocodiles. You continue wandering, eventually reaching the edge of the city. Before you stretches the fertile plain of the Nile Valley, a patchwork of green fields and irrigation canals. In the distance, you can see the imposing silhouette of the Karnak Temple, the largest religious structure ever built. It's a truly awe-inspiring sight. You vow to visit it later, but for now, you just want to find some shade and maybe a less river-flavored drink. As you turn back towards the city, you notice something glittering in the sand. You bend down and pick it up. It's a small, intricately carved amulet, shaped like a scarab beetle. A scarab beetle for you, a very welcome addition to your collection. The last thing you need, however, is to be found trying to steal it though. Who knows, maybe it's a sign of good luck. Or maybe it's just another bug to avoid. Either way, you tuck it into your tunic and hope for the best. Besides, you have a sneaky suspicion that you'll need all the luck you can get to survive another day in ancient Thebes. And also to survive your digestive system. But maybe, just maybe, this little scarab is your ticket to a slightly less chaotic existence in this fascinating, but thoroughly unpredictable, world. Okay, settle in. Let's talk about mornings. Not your morning, necessarily, although I am genuinely curious if you hit snooze 3 times before finally dragging yourself out of bed. No, we're talking about ancient mornings. Specifically, the kinds experienced by people who thought pleasing the gods was more important than, say, a decent cup of coffee, though maybe they had something even better. We'll see. You trudge through the pre-dawn chill. The air, thick with the smell of wood smoke and something vaguely animal, bites at your cheeks. You're probably wearing some sort of rough linen or wool garment. Comfort was not a priority back then, and scratching is just part of the experience. Maybe a toga, maybe a tunic. It depends on where you are, geographically speaking, but the general principle is the same: itchy fabrics reign supreme. Your feet, oh, your poor feet, are likely clad in sandals or, worse, nothing at all. Imagine stepping in something unpleasant before your day even begins. Ah, the joys of antiquity. As the first sliver of sun peeks over the horizon, you join your family or community in some sort of ritual cleansing. Maybe you're splashing water on your face and hands from a communal well, or perhaps you're performing a more elaborate ritual ablution in a designated area. Water was precious, obviously, but cleanliness, at least, ritual cleanliness, was considered crucial for approaching the gods. Think of it as spiritual hand sanitizer, but instead of killing germs, it purifies your soul, allegedly. I mean, no one's really done a controlled study on that, have they? Now, the real fun begins. The prayers. Oh, the prayers! Depending on your cultural background, you might be chanting hymns, reciting specific verses, or simply offering silent supplications. You might be facing east, towards the rising sun, a pretty common theme across many cultures, or towards a specific temple or sacred site. The content of these prayers varied wildly, of course. Some were general expressions of gratitude for the previous day and requests for protection in the coming one. Others were more specific: pleas for good health, a bountiful harvest, or success in business or battle. And let's be honest, a little bit of flattery never hurt. You know, the whole, "Oh great and powerful deity, you are so awesome and benevolent, please don't smite me," kind of thing. You've got to butter them up, right? Because who doesn't love a good compliment? Even gods. And then come the offerings. This is where things get interesting. Forget leaving out milk and cookies for Santa. The ancients were on a whole different level. Food offerings were a staple across countless cultures. Grain, fruit, vegetables, and even entire cooked meals were presented to the gods, either directly on altars or burned as sacrifices. The idea was to provide sustenance for the deities, although, logically, they probably didn't actually need to eat, right? It was more about demonstrating devotion and establishing a reciprocal relationship. We give you food, you give us blessings. Fair trade, right? Historians still argue whether these food offerings were meant to be consumed literally by the gods, or whether they were symbolic gestures meant to appease them, or maybe even just ways for the community to share a meal together. The type of offering, naturally, depended on the specific god being honored. A deity associated with agriculture might receive offerings of grain or freshly harvested produce. A god of war might receive a more substantial offering, like an animal sacrifice. Yep, animal sacrifices were a pretty common practice in many ancient religions. Sheep, goats, cattle, and even pigs were offered to the gods, usually through ritual slaughter. The animal's blood was often considered to be particularly potent, and it might be poured onto the altar or used to consecrate sacred objects. The meat, after being offered to the gods, was often consumed by the priests and worshippers in a communal feast. So, nothing goes to waste. Except, perhaps, the animal's life. But hey, at least it's for a good cause, or at least, that's what they told themselves. One quirky tidbit? In ancient Greece, there were specific rules about which part of the animal went to the gods and which part went to the people. Usually, the gods got the less desirable parts, like the bones and fat, wrapped in a thin layer of meat. The people, on the other hand, got the juicy cuts. Some scholars argue this was a clever way for the Greeks to justify eating the best parts of the sacrificed animal, while still appearing pious. Talk about a culinary loophole! Now, before you get too squeamish, let's remember that animal sacrifice was often seen as a sacred act, a way of reaffirming the bond between humans and the divine. It wasn't just about killing an animal. It was about offering something of value to the gods in exchange for their favor. It was a spiritual transaction, if you will. Plus, free meat. But wait, there's more. Food wasn't the only thing offered to the gods. Incense, flowers, and other precious objects were also commonly used. The fragrant smoke of incense was believed to carry prayers to the heavens, while flowers symbolized beauty and reverence. In some cultures, even more extravagant offerings were made, such as jewelry, precious metals, and even human sacrifices. Okay, let's pause on the human sacrifices for a moment. Yes, they happened. And yes, they were as horrific as they sound. Fortunately, they were relatively rare compared to other types of offerings. But they did occur in certain cultures, often in times of crisis or as a way of appeasing particularly demanding deities. Historians still argue whether these sacrifices were seen as necessary evils or whether they were driven by other factors, such as political power struggles or social control. Whatever the reason, they are a stark reminder of the darker aspects of ancient religious practices. One mainstream historical fact? The Roman Emperor Constantine made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire in the 4th century AD. And this obviously had a ripple effect and changed the religious landscape across the world. And not to get too into it, because this is about mornings, but imagine waking up and finding out your main deity has been legally sidelined. What would you do? What would you eat? But let's get back to the calmer stuff, the routine. The morning rituals weren't just about offering things to the gods. They were also about receiving things from them. In many cultures, oracles and priests would interpret signs and omens, seeking guidance from the divine on matters of importance. Dreams were often seen as messages from the gods, and skilled interpreters could decipher their hidden meanings. It was like having a direct line to the divine hotline, except instead of getting customer service, you got cryptic advice and vague prophecies. And speaking of cryptic advice, have you ever wondered how ancient people managed to tell time before clocks? Well, one method involved observing the position of the sun and stars. Sundials were used to track the sun's movement across the sky, while astronomical observations helped to determine the time of year and predict important events like solstices and equinoxes. I mean, imagine relying on the sun to tell you when to start your workday. Sorry I'm late, boss. The sun was being indecisive this morning. I can see the HR paperwork piling up. The morning rituals were also a time for connecting with ancestors. Many ancient cultures believed that the spirits of their ancestors continued to influence the world of the living, and that they could be called upon for guidance and protection. Offerings of food and drink were often left at ancestral shrines, and prayers were recited in their honor. It was a way of maintaining a sense of continuity and ensuring that the past was not forgotten. It's kind of nice, right? Okay, so you've cleansed yourself, prayed to the gods, offered them food, maybe even sacrificed an animal, hopefully not a human, consulted the oracles, and paid your respects to your ancestors. What's next? Well, it's time to start your day. And depending on your social status and occupation, that could mean anything from tending to your crops to working in a craft shop to governing an empire. But whatever you do it with the knowledge that you have done your part to appease the gods and secure their blessings. And that, in itself, is a pretty good way to start the day. I hope I haven't made you too sleepy. Oh wait, that's the point. Alright, settle in, sleepyheads. Let's get you ready to face the Egyptian morning. Yes, even in your imagination you need to prepare. Now, I know you're probably thinking pyramids and pharaohs, but before you go off raiding tombs, we need to talk about the most important meal of the day, breakfast. You trudge out of your modest mud-brick home, maybe shared with several generations of your family. The sun is already beating down, even though it's barely dawn. Roosters are crowing, or, well, the Egyptian equivalent, which might be more of a goose honking aggressively in your general direction. Fun fact, domesticated geese were super important in ancient Egypt, not just for breakfast omelets, but also for religious ceremonies. Yeah, try picturing your Sunday roast as a sacred symbol. The air is thick with the smell of dust and wood smoke, a sensory cocktail that's both gritty and strangely comforting. You rub the sleep from your eyes, which, let's be honest, probably have a little sand in them. Welcome to Egypt. You head towards the communal oven, a hub of activity where women are already bustling, preparing the day's bread. What's on the menu? Well, forget your sugary cereals. You're looking at a hearty helping of full medams, stewed fava beans seasoned with cumin and maybe a bit of garlic, depending on what's available. It's simple, nutritious, and smells, well, earthy. You scoop it up with a piece of flatbread, probably made from emmer wheat, the staple grain of the time. Emmer wheat bread wasn't exactly light and fluffy, mind you. Think more along the lines of dense and chewy, possibly with a few stray bits of chaff. But hey, fiber! And what about something sweet? Maybe some dates, a delicious and readily available treat. Did you know that Egyptians were cultivating dates as early as 4000 BC? That's a serious commitment to the fruit bowl. And honey if you're lucky. Honey was a luxury item, often used in religious offerings and reserved for the wealthier folks. So if you're drowning your full in honey, you're basically living the high life, ancient Egyptian style. While you're chowing down, take a look around. You'll notice most people are eating with their hands. Forks were still a few millennia away from being invented. And you know what? It actually enhances the experience. Get messy, embrace the textures, feel the food between your fingers. Just try not to flick any fava beans on your neighbor. They probably won't appreciate it. Now, here's a slightly less appetizing fact for you. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians suffered from the same kinds of food-borne illnesses we do today. Considering their food preparation methods and lack of refrigeration, it's a fair bet that a dodgy stomach was a regular occurrence. So, maybe that extra cumin wasn't just for flavor. It might have had some antimicrobial properties. Nature's Pepto-Bismol, anyone? Okay, breakfast is done. Time for basic hygiene. Now I know what you're thinking, ancient Egyptians. Hygiene? Aren't they the ones with all the cats and questionable medical practices? Well, hold your horses, or your chariots. The Egyptians were actually surprisingly clean, especially compared to some other ancient civilizations. First things first, washing. Water was, obviously, essential for life in the desert. You head to the nearest water source, which could be the Nile River or a local well. Buckets and pots are used to haul the water back to your home. Now, bathing wasn't exactly a daily shower experience. Full-body immersion was more of a luxury, reserved for special occasions or the wealthy. For everyday cleansing, you'd likely use a basin of water and a piece of cloth. And what about soap? Well, they didn't have Dove or Irish Spring. Instead, they used a mixture of animal or vegetable oils with alkaline salts. It probably wasn't as foamy or fragrant as what you're used to, but it got the job done. They also used natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture, as a cleaning agent for everything from laundry to teeth. Speaking of teeth, oral hygiene was a big deal in ancient Egypt. They understood the importance of keeping their pearly whites, or, well, their brownish, slightly chipped whites, clean. They used a variety of methods, including chewing on twigs with frayed ends to act as a sort of toothbrush. And for toothpaste? A mixture of things like powdered ox hooves, ashes, and myrrh. Sounds delicious, right? I'm just kidding, of course. I bet it tastes like, well, you can imagine. And get this, some archaeological evidence suggests that ancient Egyptians even used breath mints. They made little pellets out of things like myrrh, frankincense, and cinnamon. Talk about fancy. You just know some pharaoh was walking around with minty fresh breath, ready to charm the pants off Cleopatra, even if she wasn't born yet. Now, let's talk about grooming. Ancient Egyptians were obsessed with their appearance. Both men and women wore makeup, not just for aesthetic reasons, but also for protection from the sun and elements. Kohl eyeliner, made from galena, a lead sulfide, was used to darken the eyes and reduce glare. An eyeshadow, made from ground-up minerals like malachite and lapis lazuli, added a pop of color. And it wasn't just about the face. Egyptians also paid close attention to their hair. Wigs were popular, especially among the elite. They shaved their heads for hygiene and comfort, and then donned elaborate wigs made from human hair, sheep's wool, or even plant fibers. These wigs were often styled and adorned with jewelry, flowers, and even beeswax to hold their shape. Imagine having to beeswax your hair every morning. Talk about a sticky situation. The average Egyptian, though, probably kept their hair relatively short and neat. Men often shaved their faces, using copper or bronze razors. Ouch. You'd want a steady hand for that. Women often wore their hair long and braided, sometimes adding extensions made from human hair or plant fibers. One quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians were also obsessed with body hair removal. They used a variety of methods, including tweezers, razors, and even a kind of sugaring paste made from honey and other ingredients. Historians still argue whether this was purely for aesthetic reasons or if it also had a practical purpose, like reducing body lice. I'm guessing it was a bit of both. After all, nobody wants to be itchy and hairy in the scorching desert sun. And don't forget about personal hygiene products. Ancient Egyptians didn't have deodorant in a stick, but they did use scented oils and perfumes to mask body odor. They extracted essential oils from flowers, herbs, and spices and blended them into fragrant concoctions. Frankincense and myrrh were particularly popular, not just for their pleasant aromas but also for their perceived medicinal properties. So, you're probably smelling amazing, if just a little bit like a spice rack. So, there you have it, your basic Egyptian morning routine. You've eaten your full, washed your face, brushed your teeth, with powdered ox hooves, no less, and applied your kohl eyeliner. You're ready to face the day, whether you're building pyramids, farming the fields, or just trying to avoid getting bitten by a scorpion. And you're surprisingly clean, even by today's standards. Who knew ancient Egyptians were such sticklers for hygiene? Now, go forth and conquer. Or, just survive. That's a pretty good accomplishment too. Alright, settle in, friend. Get comfy. We're heading back in time, way back, to the land of the pharaohs. Forget your deadlines, your emails, and that slightly embarrassing thing you did at the office party. You're about to become a farmer. In ancient Egypt, the sun, a monstrous orange eye, bleeds over the horizon. You're not sure what time it is, because, clocks weren't exactly a thing back then. Let's just say it's brutally early. You stumble out of your mud brick hut, trying not to stub your toe on the uneven floor. Your muscles ache, a gentle reminder of yesterday's backbreaking labor. Speaking of which, that wasn't entirely figurative. Probably. The air is thick and humid, already promising a scorcher. The smell of the Nile hangs heavy, a mix of earthy mud, stagnant water, and something vaguely fishy. Not the appetizing kind. You pull on your linen loincloth, surprisingly comfortable, actually, and rub the sleep from your eyes. You grab your hoe, basically a glorified stick with a metal blade, and head out to the fields. You join the other farmers, a silent procession of weary souls, trudging towards the fertile black soil bordering the river. It's still relatively cool, a brief reprieve before the sun turns everything into a shimmering oven. As you walk, you notice the irrigation canals snaking through the fields, meticulously maintained to channel the life-giving waters of the Nile. The Egyptians were masters of irrigation, you see. They understood the delicate balance of flooding and drought, harnessing the river's power to nourish their crops. Without this sophisticated system, well, there wouldn't have been much of an Egypt at all. Here's a mainstream historical fact for you. The Nile River was absolutely central to ancient Egyptian life, providing not only water for irrigation and drinking but also a transportation route and fertile silt for agriculture. It was the lifeblood of the entire civilization. Seems obvious, but it's worth saying. Imagine trying to order food from Seamless in ancient Egypt? Yeah, no thanks. You arrive at your assigned plot of land. It's damp and rich, smelling faintly of decay, not in a bad way, more like a life-giving decay. You glance at the other farmers. Everyone is getting to work, heads down, focused. There's a quiet dignity in their labor, a deep connection to the land that sustains them. You, on the other hand, are feeling slightly less dignified. You're pretty sure that beetle just gave you the side eye. You start tilling the soil, swinging your hoe in a rhythmic motion. It's harder than it looks. The earth is heavy and resistant, and your arms quickly begin to burn. You're pretty sure your form is awful. You try to remember what your Pilates instructor said about engaging your core. Turns out, ancient Egyptian farming is a killer workout. Who knew? As you work, you notice a small shrine at the edge of the field, dedicated to a local deity, maybe Sobek, the crocodile god, or Hapi, the god of the Nile floods. Egyptians were deeply religious, and their lives were interwoven with their beliefs. They believed in a complex pantheon of gods and goddesses, each with their own domain and responsibilities. Appeasing these deities was crucial for ensuring a good harvest and a prosperous life. You imagine that deity is probably not very pleased with your current technique. Time stretches out, blurring into a monotonous rhythm of swing, dig, repeat. The sun climbs higher, its heat intensifying. Sweat trickles down your face, stinging your eyes. You take a swig of water from your clay flask. It's lukewarm and tastes faintly of mud. Delicious. You're starting to wish you had invested in a better water filtration system. Maybe you could have pitched it on Shark Tank, Ancient Egypt. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Ancient Egyptians sometimes paid their workers in beer. Yes, you read that right. Beer was considered a staple food and a form of currency. Imagine payday being a six-pack. It's basically the ancient equivalent of a company happy hour, except mandatory and probably less fun. As the sun beats down, you try to focus on the task at hand. You think about the crops you're planting: emmer, wheat, barley, flax. These crops will feed your family, clothe you, linen is made from flax, and provide the raw materials for various crafts. You feel a sense of connection to the past, a realization that you are participating in a tradition that stretches back thousands of years. Although, in all honesty, mostly you're thinking about how much your back hurts. You notice a group of scribes walking through the fields, clipboards. Well, not clipboards exactly, more like papyrus scrolls, in hand. They are recording the amount of land each farmer has cultivated, estimating the expected yield, and assessing the overall health of the crops. The Egyptians were meticulous record keepers, and their agricultural practices were highly organized. They understood the importance of planning and documentation for ensuring a stable food supply. You wonder if you can fudge your numbers a little bit. Maybe claim you were attacked by locusts. You take another break, finding a sliver of shade beneath a scraggly acacia tree. You watch as a flock of ibises flies overhead, their white wings flashing in the sunlight. Ibises were sacred birds to the Egyptians, associated with the god Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. Seeing them brings a sense of peace, a reminder of the beauty and mystery of the natural world. It also reminds you that you should probably learn how to write something other than your name, just in case you get called upon to scribe something. Here's an open scholarly debate phrase for you. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptian agricultural system was primarily based on forced labor or a system of mutual cooperation and shared benefit. Some argue that the pharaohs exploited the farmers, extracting maximum labor for minimal reward. Others contend that the farmers were relatively autonomous, working together to manage the land and share the fruits of their labor. Either way, your back still hurts. As the day wears on, you start to feel a strange sense of accomplishment. You've tilled your plot of land, planted your seeds, and contributed to the collective effort. You've become a part of the cycle of life, a link in the chain that connects the past, present, and future. You also feel a strong desire for a long nap and a cold beer, preferably not paid as a salary. The sun begins to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and purple. The air cools slightly, bringing a welcome relief. You gather your tools and join the other farmers on the walk back to the village. There's a quiet camaraderie among you, a shared understanding of the hardships and rewards of your labor. Before you reach your hut, you stop at the local market. The aromas are intoxicating: freshly baked bread, grilled fish, and spices from distant lands. You buy a loaf of bread and a handful of dates, treating yourself after a long day's work. You might even splurge on a small jug of beer. You earned it. You return to your hut, exhausted but satisfied. You eat your simple meal, watching as the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. You lie down on your straw mat, closing your eyes. You are grateful for the roof over your head, the food in your belly, and the sense of belonging to a community. Here's your third, and final, joke. What do you call an Egyptian who is always lying? A denialer. As you drift off to sleep, you think about the challenges and rewards of being a farmer in ancient Egypt. It's a hard life, but it's also a life of purpose and connection. You are intimately tied to the land, to the seasons, and to the rhythms of the Nile. You are a part of something bigger than yourself, a part of the ancient story of Egypt. And you're definitely going to need a massage in the morning. Seriously, you're going to be so sore. Sleep well, if you can, after all that tilling. Oh, and one more quirky tidbit before you doze off. Ancient Egyptian farmers were sometimes buried with miniature tools and models of their farms, so they could continue their work in the afterlife. Imagine arriving in the afterlife and being immediately assigned to agricultural duties. That's what I call job security. And now, finally, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and good night, at last. Alright, settle in. Let's get comfy. You've decided today is the day you learn a new skill. And not just any skill, mind you. We're talking something real. Something tangible. Something that connects you to millennia of human ingenuity and dirt. Yes, my friend, you're going to learn pottery. Or maybe carpentry. Who am I to choose for you? Flip a coin. Heads for clay, tails for wood. No cheating. Okay, ready? Let's assume the coin landed on heads. Pottery it is. You start by dragging yourself, possibly reluctantly, out to the pottery studio. It smells earthy, damp, a little like your gym socks after a particularly brutal workout. But that's okay. It's honest work. And honestly, you've smelled worse. Now, before you even think about touching the wheel, you need the clay. You trudge over to a bin overflowing with a gray-brown mass. This isn't just any old dirt you find in your backyard, though technically it is kind of dirt. This is clay, specifically formulated for throwing. It's been wedged, which, let me tell you, is a workout in itself. Wedging is basically like giving the clay a really good massage to remove air bubbles. Air bubbles are the enemy. They're the gremlins of the pottery world, waiting to explode your carefully crafted masterpiece in the kiln. And nobody wants that. You heft a lump of clay, roughly the size of a grapefruit. It feels cool and dense in your hands. You plop it onto the wheelhead with a satisfying thunk. Now comes the fun part. Centering. This, my friend, is where patience goes to die. Centering the clay is the process of forcing this unruly lump into a perfectly balanced spinning top. It takes practice. A lot of practice. You push, you pull, you swear under your breath. The clay wobbles, defying your every attempt. It feels like wrestling a greased pig. You'll get there though. Eventually. Probably. Historians still argue whether the invention of the pottery wheel was a gradual evolution or a sudden breakthrough. Some argue it was initially used for other purposes, like spinning yarn, and then someone, probably bored, decided to see what would happen if they stuck clay on it. Necessity is the mother of invention, as they say, or maybe just rampant curiosity. Now let's fast forward a bit, because realistically, you'd be struggling with centering for a good hour. Let's say, miraculously, you've managed to center the clay. It's spinning smoothly, hypnotically. You take a deep breath. Now you can start shaping. You gently guide the clay upwards, creating a cone. Then you push it back down. Repeat. This is called coning and centering. It's like pottery yoga. Up, down, breathe. Up, down, breathe. As you work, you add a little water. Not too much. You don't want the clay to get too slippery. Too much water, and you'll get the dreaded clay soup. Believe me, you don't want clay soup. Now you open the center. Using your thumb, you press a small indentation into the top of the spinning clay. Then, you slowly widen the hole, using your fingers to control the shape. You're starting to get the hang of it. The walls of your vessel are rising, slowly but surely. You're trying to envision what it will become. A mug? A bowl? Maybe a tiny, adorable vase for your collection of miniature cacti. Don't get too ambitious too fast. Keep the walls even. Keep the pressure consistent. You are one with the clay is one with you. Did you know that the oldest pottery shards ever found date back to over 20,000 years ago? That's right. While your ancestors were busy hunting mammoths and figuring out fire, someone was also meticulously shaping clay. They probably weren't making fancy mugs for their lattes, but they were laying the groundwork, or should I say clay ground, for your current pottery adventure. Alright, so you've got a basic shape going. It's a little wobbly, a little uneven, but hey, Rome wasn't built in a day. Or, thrown in an afternoon. Now you need to refine the shape. Use your ribs, those are the smooth, curved tools, not your actual ribs, unless you're feeling particularly committed to the process, to smooth out the walls and create a more uniform curve. This is where your artistic vision comes into play. Do you want a wide, shallow bowl? Or a tall, slender vase? It's all up to you. Experiment. Play around. Don't be afraid to mess up. That's how you learn. And besides, clay is infinitely recyclable. If you really screw it up, you can just mush it back into a lump and start over. No harm, no foul. Now for a quirky tidbit. In some ancient cultures, pottery shards were used as a form of ostracism. Citizens would write the name of someone they wanted to exile on a piece of broken pottery, and if enough shards with the same name were collected, that person was banished. Talk about a harsh review system. You've spent a good amount of time shaping and refining, and now it's time to remove your masterpiece from the wheel. This is a delicate operation. You use a wire tool to carefully separate the base of the pot from the wheel head. You slide your hands underneath, gently lifting it off. It's surprisingly heavy. You carry it over to a drying rack and place it among the other works in progress. Now you step back and admire your handiwork. It's not perfect, not even close, but it's yours. You made it. Out of a lump of mud, you created something beautiful, something functional, something potentially disastrous if you don't fire it correctly. But let's not dwell on that. The next step is letting it dry. This is crucial. If you fire it too soon, the moisture inside will turn to steam and boom! Cracks everywhere. You want it to dry slowly and evenly. This might take a few days, or even a week, depending on the humidity. Patience, young Padawan. Patience. While you wait, let's say our hypothetical coin flip went the other way. Let's imagine your destiny lies not with clay, but with wood. You find yourself not in a pottery studio, but in a woodshop. The air smells of sawdust and varnish, a strangely comforting aroma. You see various tools hanging on the wall, saws, chisels, planes, all gleaming menacingly. You grab a piece of wood. Let's say it's a nice piece of walnut. It feels smooth and warm in your hands. Carpentry, unlike pottery, is often considered a subtractive process. You start with a block of material and remove pieces until you achieve your desired form. So, like Michelangelo said, he just unlocked the statue trapped inside the marble. A little pretentious? Maybe, but it applies. You decide to make a simple wooden box. Nothing fancy. Just a box. But even a simple box requires skill and precision. You start by measuring and marking your cuts. Measure twice, cut once, as they say. Or if you're like me, measure once, cut, realize you messed up, measure again, and cut again. It's a process. You clamp the wood to your workbench and grab your saw. The rhythmic swish-swish of the saw fills the air. You carefully follow your lines. It takes effort, but you find a certain satisfaction in the controlled aggression of the saw against the wood. Don't forget to breathe. You don't want to pass out from sawdust inhalation. That wouldn't be a good look. Did you know that the ancient Egyptians were master carpenters? They built elaborate furniture, boats, and even coffins, using tools that were surprisingly similar to the ones we use today. They were also big fans of elaborate joinery, creating incredibly strong and durable structures. And they didn't even have power tools. Though, to be fair, they did have slaves. Not exactly an even playing field, resource-wise. With your pieces cut, you need to join them together. You could just nail them, but that would be pedestrian. Instead, you decide to try your hand at dovetail joints. These are interlocking joints that are incredibly strong and visually appealing. They're also notoriously difficult to master. You grab your chisel and begin to carefully carve out the dovetails. This requires precision and a steady hand. One wrong move and you could ruin the entire piece. You work slowly and deliberately, taking your time to ensure that each joint fits perfectly. Now, for a quirky carpentry fact. Did you know that woodworkers used to believe that certain types of wood were imbued with magical properties? Oak, for example, was thought to ward off evil spirits, while cedar was said to promote good health. So maybe your wooden box will not only hold your trinkets but also protect you from, well, whatever it is you're worried about. Historians still argue whether the rise of timber-framed buildings was driven more by environmental availability or structural ingenuity. It seems pretty obvious, but hey, it is history. You finally managed to assemble the box. The dovetail joints fit snugly together, creating a strong and seamless connection. You sand down the edges, smoothing out any rough spots. Now, it's time to apply a finish. You choose a simple oil finish, which will enhance the natural beauty of the wood. You apply the oil with a soft cloth, rubbing it into the wood in circular motions. The wood drinks up the oil, becoming richer and more vibrant. You let it dry, then apply another coat. And maybe another. You want that wood to shine, my friend. Finally, your wooden box is complete. It's a simple box, but it's a testament to your skill and dedication. You made it with your own 2 hands from a raw piece of wood. And that's something to be proud of. I hope you have enjoyed this little journey into the worlds of pottery and carpentry. Now it's time for you to go on your own journey. Do not think, just do. And well, I suppose, good night. Alright, settle down. You're here now, aren't you? Good. Take a deep breath. Or don't. Honestly, whatever. You're about to be assaulted by every imaginable smell, sound, and sight, so bracing yourself might be a good idea. You step into the marketplace, and whoa, sensory overload, much? You trudge along, immediately dodging a rickety cart piled high with, well, something vaguely green and leafy. The driver, a woman with a face like weathered leather and a voice like a foghorn, shouts something at you in a language you definitely don't understand. You smile weakly and hustle on, suddenly feeling very vulnerable and tourist. Why? The air is thick with the aroma of spices, roasting meats, and something vaguely floral that's actually quite pleasant. It's all fighting for dominance in your nostrils, creating a symphony, a very loud, slightly overwhelming symphony, of smells. You can almost taste the history hanging in the air. This isn't some carefully curated historical reenactment. This is the real deal, the kind of place where deals are struck, gossip is traded, and fortunes are made or lost before lunch. You pass a stall overflowing with brightly colored textiles. Silks, cottons, maybe even some wool. It's a riot of textures and patterns. You reach out to touch a length of indigo cloth, the dye cool and smooth beneath your fingertips. You can almost imagine the artisan who painstakingly created it, meticulously dyeing the threads and weaving them into this beautiful fabric. Did they have a Netflix subscription? Probably not. But maybe they had some juicy local drama to keep them entertained while they worked. Priorities, right? Speaking of history, did you know that marketplaces have been around for, like, forever? Seriously, archaeologists have found evidence of organized trading centers dating back to ancient Mesopotamia. Imagine bartering for your groceries with a Sumerian farmer. Talk about a history lesson. The ancient Egyptians even had designated market days, and some of their markets were strictly run by women. Girl power, even back then. Historians still argue whether these marketplaces were primarily economic centers or also served as important social and political hubs. Probably both, duh. Humans are complicated. You continue deeper into the labyrinthine marketplace. The crowd thickens, and you're practically shoulder to shoulder with other shoppers, merchants, and are those chickens? Yep, definitely chickens. One squawks indignantly as you accidentally step on its foot. You apologize profusely, even though you doubt it understands a word you're saying. You know what would make everything better? A tiny cowboy hat. For the chicken. You make a mental note to invent that later. Suddenly, you're surrounded by the sounds of haggling. Voices rise and fall, hands gesture wildly, and coins clink as deals are struck. You watch a man with a particularly impressive beard negotiate the price of a rug with a tenacity that would make a used car salesman blush. He's clearly a pro. You wonder if he takes classes. Advanced haggling for the discerning gentleman, beard not included. You stop at a stall selling what looks like some kind of fried dough. It smells amazing. The vendor, a jovial man with a flour-dusted apron, smiles and offers you a sample. It's sweet, crispy, and utterly delicious. You buy a whole bag, because obviously you do. You try to pay with a credit card, but he just laughs. Cash only, my friend, he says, pointing to a small wooden box overflowing with coins. The old ways are the best ways, sometimes. Now, a slightly less well-known fact for you. In medieval Europe, marketplaces weren't just places to buy and sell goods. They were also centers of legal authority. Market courts were often established to resolve disputes and enforce fair trading practices. Imagine getting hauled into court for selling a subpar turnip. The drama. It definitely sounds better than traffic court. Also, some historical accounts suggest that market vendors occasionally used secret codes and symbols to communicate with each other and keep their prices competitive. Spies in the spice aisle. You munch on your fried dough as you wander past a stall selling pottery. Bowls, vases, plates, all handmade and intricately decorated. You pick up a small, blue-glazed bowl and admire its craftsmanship. It's surprisingly heavy, and you imagine it filled with steaming lentil soup on a cold winter night. You suddenly have a powerful urge to learn pottery. Maybe you'll take a class when you get back home. Or maybe you'll just watch pottery videos on YouTube. Let's be real. The sun beats down on your neck, and you start to feel the heat. You could definitely use a drink. You spot a vendor selling some kind of brightly colored juice, and you head over to investigate. It looks like a mix of fruits you can't even identify, but it smells refreshing. You point to a glass and hand over some coins. The juice is tart, sweet, and surprisingly addictive. You gulp it down in seconds. Brain freeze! Worth it. As you sip your juice, you notice a group of musicians playing in the center of the marketplace. A lute, a flute, and some kind of drum. They're creating a lively, upbeat melody that makes you want to dance. You tap your foot to the rhythm and watch as a few people actually start to dance. They're terrible dancers, but their enthusiasm is infectious. You resist the urge to join them, mostly because you're also a terrible dancer, and you don't want to embarrass yourself. Plus, you still have that whole bag of fried dough to deal with. Fun fact, the tradition of street performers in marketplaces dates back centuries. In ancient Rome, for example, wandering musicians, jugglers, and acrobats would often entertain shoppers and merchants in exchange for coins or food. So basically, the buskers you see in your local park are carrying on a time-honored tradition. Although, I'm not sure if playing the ukulele counts as a time-honored art form. Still entertaining, though. And speaking of entertaining, apparently some historical marketplaces even featured animal acts. Trained monkeys, dancing bears, you name it. You wonder if PETA existed back then. You feel a tug on your sleeve. You turn to see a small child, no older than 6, holding out a handful of flowers. They're wilting slightly, but still fragrant. The child looks at you with big, pleading eyes. You melt a little. You know you're probably being scammed, but you can't help yourself. You hand over a few coins and take the flowers. You wonder if the child will use the money to buy food, or if they'll be forced to give it to some shady adult. You hope it's the former. You place the flowers carefully in your bag, trying not to crush them. The marketplace continues to pulsate around you. People are shouting, bargaining, laughing, and gossiping. It's a chaotic, vibrant scene, a microcosm of life itself. You feel a strange sense of connection to all these people, even though you don't speak their language and you'll probably never see them again. You're all just trying to make a living, buy some food, and maybe find a little bit of joy in the process. Isn't that what it's all about? You pass a stall selling, is that snails? Yep, definitely snails. Cooked snails. In a broth. You try not to gag. You're not exactly a picky eater, but snails are definitely not on your list of culinary must-tries. You politely decline the vendor's offer to sample one. Maybe next time, you say, forcing a smile. You wonder who actually enjoys eating snails. The French? Probably. No offense, France. Historians still argue whether marketplaces were truly democratic spaces, accessible to all members of society, or whether they were ultimately controlled by wealthy merchants and powerful elites. While marketplaces undoubtedly provided opportunities for economic advancement, they also often reinforced existing social hierarchies. The poor were often relegated to selling the cheapest goods, while the rich could afford to import luxury items from faraway lands. It's a complex issue, with no easy answers. Kinda like politics. You buy a small, hand-carved wooden elephant as a souvenir. You know you'll probably forget where you bought it within a few months, but it's a nice reminder of your experience. You also buy a bag of roasted nuts, because you're feeling snacky. You're pretty sure you're going to regret eating all these snacks later, but hey, you're on vacation. As you make your way back towards the entrance, you realize you're actually starting to enjoy the chaos. You've even picked up a few phrases in the local language, enough to haggle for a slightly better price on the nuts. You might even come back tomorrow. Or maybe you'll just take a nap. Who are we kidding? Before you leave, you spot one last stall selling miniature suits of armor for cats? Seriously? You have to take a picture. This is amazing. You almost buy one for your own cat, but you know he'd probably just hate it. Plus, he's already got that whole "I'm better than you" attitude down pat. He doesn't need any more help. Okay, deep breath. You've been at it for hours now, haven't you? The sun, a relentless stage spotlight, has been baking the fields since dawn. You can practically taste the dust, a gritty film coating your tongue. The air itself hums with heat, thick and shimmering like a mirage. You feel it clinging to your skin, turning your tunic into a second, sweat-soaked hide. Time for a break, eh? You deserve it. You trudge towards the shade of a lone fig tree, its gnarled branches offering a meager respite from the sun's intensity. Honestly, shade is a generous term. More like filtered sunlight that still manages to find its way into every nook and cranny. You settle down anyway, leaning against the rough bark. It's surprisingly cool to the touch, a welcome contrast to the scorching earth. Time for the midday meal. It's not exactly Michelin star dining, mind you. More like peasant chic. You rummage in your woven sack, pulling out a hunk of barley bread, hardened with age but still edible. And some olives, wrinkled and swimming in their own salty brine. Delicious! Well, relatively. Don't forget the leek you nabbed from the garden earlier. It's not exactly a balanced diet, but it's fuel. You take a bite of the bread. It's dense. You chew slowly, deliberately, extracting every last bit of sustenance. Maybe you should have dunked it in the water skin first. Next time. The olives provide a burst of flavor, a salty, tangy punch that cuts through the monotony of the bread. And the leek? Well, the leek is green. Good enough. While you're eating, let me tell you something interesting. Did you know that the ancient Romans, even the peasants, actually had pretty good dental hygiene? They used things like crushed bones, oyster shells, and even, get this, urine, to clean their teeth. Now, I'm not suggesting you try that last one, but hey, if it worked for them. Also, Roman dental hygiene wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Tooth extractions, often performed with rudimentary tools, were common and no doubt incredibly painful. Imagine going to the dentist back then. You might be better off just living with the cavities. Historians still argue whether the average Roman peasant actually had enough food to eat. Some argue that archaeological evidence suggests widespread malnutrition, pointing to stunted growth and skeletal markers of disease. Others contend that literary accounts, though often idealized, suggest a more varied and sufficient diet. It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white, and that reconstructing the lives of ordinary people from the past is a complex and often speculative endeavor. I imagine it probably changed regionally as well and how close you were to the city. Anyway, back to your humble repast. You finish your bread, olives, and leek. Feeling, well, not exactly full, but definitely less empty. You take a long swig from your water skin, the cool liquid soothing your parched throat. Ah, that's the stuff. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, peasant style. No fancy napkins here. Now for the siesta. The best part of the day, if you asked me. You find a relatively smooth patch of ground under the fig tree and lie down, closing your eyes. The sun still manages to peek through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on your eyelids. You can hear the buzzing of insects, the chirping of cicadas, the distant bleating of sheep. It's a symphony of the countryside, a lullaby that slowly begins to wash over you. But you may want to keep one eye open. The Roman countryside, while seemingly idyllic, was also fraught with dangers. Snakes were common, and not the cute garter snake variety. We're talking venomous vipers, lurking in the tall grass, just waiting to strike. And then there were the bandits. Roaming gangs of desperate men, preying on unsuspecting travelers. You wouldn't want to become their next victim, would you? Of course, there was also the risk of boredom. Okay, maybe boredom isn't a life-threatening danger, but it can feel that way after a few hours of staring at the same patch of sky. But the average Roman peasant, to the best of our knowledge, didn't have access to Netflix or TikTok, so they had to find other ways to entertain themselves. Storytelling, music, games of chance, anything to break the monotony of their daily lives. I imagine a few rounds of guess the cloud shape could occupy at least half an hour. As you lie there, drifting in and out of sleep, let me share a slightly quirky fact with you. The Romans were obsessed with sleep. Like really obsessed. They believed that sleep was essential for physical and mental health, and they had all sorts of rituals and beliefs surrounding it. They even had a god of sleep, Somnus, who was depicted as a winged youth, sprinkling poppy seeds to induce slumber. You start to feel the drowsiness creep in. You feel as if you're sinking into the earth, becoming one with the soil. The buzzing of insects fades into a distant hum. The chirping of cicadas becomes a gentle rhythm. Your breathing slows. Your muscles relax. You're not quite asleep, but you're definitely not awake. You're in that liminal space between consciousness and unconsciousness, where thoughts and dreams mingle and blur. It's kind of like watching a really boring documentary, where you keep nodding off but then jolting awake just in time to catch the narrator say something vaguely interesting. And just as you start to drift off completely, a thought pops into your head. What if you woke up and discovered that this whole thing, this whole Roman peasant experience, was just a dream? What if you woke up in your own bed, in your own time, with all the comforts and conveniences of the modern world? Would you be relieved? Or would you be disappointed? It's a strange question, I know. But it's the kind of question that pops into your head when you're half asleep, half awake, and completely disconnected from reality. A kind of existential snoozing. But that sleep. It's calling you and you can barely resist it. You tell yourself you'll stay awake and think deep thoughts, ponder the meaning of existence. Maybe even come up with a solution to that one problem at work that's been nagging you. But you're kidding yourself, of course. You know you're going to fall asleep. It's inevitable. It's like trying to stop a sneeze, or trying to avoid those super awkward family gatherings. Futile. Historians still argue whether the Roman siesta, or meridiatio, was a universal practice or limited to certain regions or social classes. Some argue that the hot climate of the Mediterranean made a midday break essential for everyone, regardless of their social status. Others contend that the practice was more common among the wealthy, who could afford to take time off from work. It's a question that may never be fully answered, but it's a reminder that the past is a complex and multifaceted puzzle. Your eyelids flutter, then close completely. You're asleep. Finally. A deep, dreamless sleep. The kind of sleep that only comes after hours of hard labor in the scorching sun. Just a little while to rest, then back to the fields. Don't worry, you won't have to use urine to clean your teeth though. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's dive back into this adventure we're having in the ancient world. You're still knee-deep, metaphorically speaking, in the daily grind, the nitty-gritty, well, you get the picture. But today, thankfully, we're moving indoors. Forget that sun beating down on your neck for a while. We're heading into the Adaba, the tablet house, or, as we might call it, school. Imagine walking through a bustling marketplace, the air thick with the smell of dates and, well, let's just say sanitation wasn't exactly their strong suit. You've finally reached the entrance, a simple archway leading into a courtyard. You step inside, and suddenly the din fades. It's still noisy, mind you. Kids are kids, even if they're wearing tunics and sandals, but there's a different kind of energy here. A feeling of, well, hopeful desperation. Because let's be honest, you're not here because you're passionately in love with cuneiform. You're here because your parents want you to not be a farmer. Which, fair enough. You find your designated spot on the floor, a reed mat next to a kid who clearly hasn't mastered personal hygiene. Fun times. Before you is a lump of clay, ready to be transformed into, well, hopefully, something legible. This isn't like modern schooling. There aren't textbooks and standardized tests, thank goodness for small mercies, right? Instead, you learn by doing, by copying, by memorizing. It's a grueling process, but it's your ticket to a better life. Plus, the teacher has a really intimidating ruler. And I don't mean for measuring. The curriculum is fairly straightforward. Learn to write cuneiform, learn to read cuneiform, and just for kicks, learn a whole lot of math. Because apparently, tracking barley harvests requires quadratic equations or something. The earliest known mathematical texts come from this period, so you're basically an ancient world mathlete. You spend hours copying lists of words, names of gods, types of animals, different kinds of beer, priority learning, obviously. Then you move on to more complex texts, legal documents, royal inscriptions, even epic poems like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Talk about required reading. Your stylus, a carefully shaped reed, becomes an extension of your hand. You press it into the soft clay, forming wedges that, when combined, create intricate symbols. It's painstaking work. One wrong move, and you've got a smudge that could be interpreted as a declaration of war instead of an inventory of sheep. And believe me, your teacher will notice. It's a long day. The sun climbs higher in the sky, turning the courtyard into a furnace. Your back aches from sitting on the floor. Your eyes blur from staring at tiny cuneiform signs. and the kid next to you keeps sniffing. But you persevere. Because you know that with each perfectly formed wedge, with each memorized line of text, you're getting closer to your goal. That goal being, hopefully, not smelling of fertilizer all day. But the Adaba wasn't just about rote memorization and endless copying. It was also about instilling a certain worldview. A belief in the power of knowledge, the importance of order, and of course, the absolute authority of the king. Because let's face it, scribes were essentially the king's PR department. They wrote the official histories, crafted the royal decrees, and generally made sure that everything looked good on paper or, clay. The scribes held an enviable position in society, acting as intermediaries between the ruler and the ruled. This included the ability to read and write, a skill set that was only available to a limited number of people. Scribes played a crucial role in the administration and governance of Mesopotamian society, as they were responsible for documenting important events, managing resources, and communicating with other city-states. And sometimes they snuck in a little bit of gossip for posterity. Imagine finding a clay tablet that's basically an ancient office memo complaining about the office thermostat. Gold. Pure gold. Now here's a quirky little tidbit for you. Did you know that some scribes specialized in dream interpretation? Yep, you heard that right. They were basically the Sigmund Freuds of the ancient world, analyzing your nocturnal ramblings and telling you whether that dream about being chased by a giant locust meant you were going to have a good harvest or get devoured by your neighbors. This practice, known as oniromancy, highlights the cultural importance of dreams in ancient Mesopotamia and the belief that they could offer insight into the future or the will of the gods. And what about the scribes who weren't exactly on the up and up? You think everyone was a paragon of virtue just because they could write? Think again. There's evidence of scribes falsifying records, manipulating accounts, and generally using their knowledge for personal gain. Talk about your original data scientists. Historians still argue whether the scribal profession was truly meritocratic, or if it was primarily reserved for the elite. Some argue that anyone with the aptitude and the dedication could rise through the ranks. Others point to the fact that most scribes came from wealthy families, suggesting that access to education was largely determined by social class. Whatever the case, there's no denying that the scribal profession was a powerful force in Mesopotamian society. Once you've mastered the basics, you might be assigned to a specific area of specialization. Some scribes became experts in law, drafting contracts and recording legal proceedings. Others focused on accounting, keeping track of the flow of goods and resources. Still others dedicated themselves to literature, copying and preserving the great works of Mesopotamian culture. There was even a specialization in music, where scribes would write down the melodies and lyrics of songs. You could have been the ancient world's version of a sheet music transcriber. Who knew? Your days aren't just spent in the Adaba, of course. You might be sent out into the field, literally. Imagine being dispatched to a remote village to oversee a harvest, or accompanying a military expedition to record the spoils of war. You'd be constantly on the move, lugging around your clay tablets and stylus, and dealing with everyone from grumpy farmers to power-hungry generals. It wasn't exactly glamorous, but it was certainly eventful. Plus, think of the stories you'd have to tell. Assuming, of course, you could survive long enough to tell them. And then there's the sheer volume of record-keeping. Everything was documented: births, deaths, marriages, land sales, tax receipts, beer orders, you name it. This resulted in an astonishing amount of clay tablets, most of which are still being unearthed today. It's like the ancient world's version of a giant hard drive, filled with all sorts of fascinating, and sometimes incredibly boring, information. Historians call this a treasure trove, and for good reason. Let's talk about taxes for a second, shall we? As a scribe, you'd be intimately involved in the collection and administration of taxes. You would meticulously record who owed what, ensuring that the royal coffers were always full. This made you about as popular as a tax audit is today, I'd wager. But hey, someone had to do it, right? You were just doing your job. And maybe, just maybe, skimming a little off the top. Just kidding. Mostly. Another key aspect of your job would be corresponding with other officials and rulers. You would draft letters, negotiate treaties, and generally act as a diplomat for your city-state. This required a delicate balance of diplomacy and assertiveness. You had to be able to represent your king's interests while also avoiding unnecessary conflict. It was a high-stakes game, but if you played your cards right, you could become a powerful figure in your own right. Now, before you start thinking that being a scribe was all drudgery and paperwork, let me tell you about the perks. You'd have access to the best food, the finest clothing, and the most comfortable accommodations. You'd be surrounded by other intelligent and accomplished individuals. And you'd have the satisfaction of knowing that you were playing a vital role in the functioning of your society. Plus, you get to carry a fancy stylus case. What's not to love? I mean, besides the whole sitting on the floor all day thing. So, as you sit there, hunched over your clay tablet, diligently practicing your cuneiform, remember that you're not just learning a skill. You're becoming part of a tradition that stretches back thousands of years. You're joining the ranks of the scribes, the keepers of knowledge, the guardians of civilization. And who knows, maybe one day your name will be etched on a clay tablet that future generations will pore over, wondering what you had for breakfast. Or, more likely, complaining about taxes. And with that, let's pause here for the night. Sweet dreams, or dreams of perfectly formed cuneiform wedges. Whatever floats your boat. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's ditch the dusty tomes for a bit and step into the sun-drenched, perfumed world of ancient Egyptian leisure. Imagine trading your sweatpants for linen robes and your Netflix binge for, well, let's see what they had on offer. You're waking up in your villa, nestled comfortably on the banks of the Nile. The air is thick with the scent of lotus and myrrh, a far cry from whatever questionable fragrance your neighbor's been experimenting with lately. Sunlight filters through the papyrus blinds, painting stripes across the mosaic floor. A servant is gently fanning you with a palm leaf, because manual labor is so last dynasty. You stretch, yawn theatrically, gotta maintain appearances, and consider your options for the day. Maybe a spot of hunting? Now, we're not talking about stalking deer in the woods. Think more along the lines of stalking ducks from a reed boat on the Nile. You're armed with a throw stick, a sort of boomerang ancestor, and the goal is to knock those waterfowl right out of the sky. Seems easy enough, right? Wrong. These birds are surprisingly agile, and you spend most of the morning swatting at flies and getting increasingly frustrated. But hey, at least you look good doing it. Your linen tunic is pristine, your wig is perfectly coiffed, and your jewelry is tastefully understated, or, as understated as solid gold can be. Historians still argue whether the nobility actually had decent success with these throw sticks, or if it was all just for show, a way to demonstrate dominance over nature without actually having to do anything. It's a bit like golf, isn't it? Lots of expensive equipment, questionable results, and plenty of time to gossip. Later, you might decide to indulge in a game of Senet. This was the ancient Egyptian equivalent of chess, checkers, and Monopoly all rolled into one. The board itself was beautifully crafted, often inlaid with ivory and precious stones. The pieces were small and symbolic, and the rules, well, they're a bit of a mystery. We know the basics: move your pieces across the board, avoid certain squares, and try to knock your opponent off. But the nuances, the strategic subtleties? Largely lost to time. Some scholars believe that Senet was more than just a game, it was a metaphor for the journey through the afterlife, with each square representing a different obstacle or challenge. Which, honestly, makes losing a lot more depressing. Imagine losing to your Uncle Seti and him saying, "Guess you're going to get eaten by Ammit in the Hall of Judgment, little brother." Good times. Perhaps you're feeling more musically inclined. Time to gather your friends, and your professional musicians, obviously, for a private concert. Flutes trill, harps strum, and singers chant ancient melodies that are both soothing and slightly hypnotic. You sip on date wine, nibble on figs, and try to look like you appreciate the subtle complexities of the music. Truth be told, you're mostly just enjoying the opportunity to show off your exquisite taste and your even more exquisite jewels. The ancient Egyptians, especially the upper class, were huge fans of music. They believed it had the power to heal, to inspire, and even to communicate with the gods. So, basically, it was their version of Spotify, only with fewer ads and significantly more reverb. As the afternoon wanes, you might head down to the river for a leisurely boat ride. Picture this: a barge adorned with colorful sails, propelled by a team of muscular oarsmen, who are probably cursing you under their breath. You recline on cushions shaded from the sun by a canopy, while servants cater to your every whim. The Nile glides past, a ribbon of shimmering gold reflecting the setting sun. You wave to the peasants working in the fields, feeling a twinge of guilt that quickly fades as you reach for another grape. This wasn't always the case, though. According to fringe theorists, some pharaohs would actually take this time to observe the river's condition and assess the needs of their people. Of course, that would have been during the off-season, when the sun wasn't as strong and the grapes weren't as ripe. And of course, no day of leisure would be complete without a bit of gossiping. Gathered in the cool shade of a garden pavilion, surrounded by fragrant flowers and bubbling fountains, you and your friends dissect the latest scandals and romantic entanglements. Who's having an affair with whose charioteer? Which priest is embezzling temple funds? Whose new wig is just tragic? It's all grist for the mill. The ancient Egyptians were just as obsessed with celebrity culture as we are today. Only their celebrities were pharaohs, priests, and high-ranking officials, and their gossip was spread by word of mouth rather than Twitter. In the evening, a lavish banquet awaits. Tables groan under the weight of roasted meats, fresh fruits, and intricately decorated cakes. You eat your fill, drink your fill, and generally revel in the abundance of your life. The conversation flows freely, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of goblets. The ancient Egyptians were renowned for their hospitality and their love of a good party. They knew how to live well, to appreciate the finer things in life, and to squeeze every last drop of enjoyment out of their time on Earth. Which, let's be honest, is a pretty good life philosophy, right? Now, here's a quirky little detail. Archaeologists have found evidence of ancient Egyptian beauty contests, though they weren't quite like the pageants we know today. These were more like informal gatherings where women would showcase their beauty and charm, competing for the attention of potential suitors. The winner would receive not a crown or a scholarship, but rather, the admiration of her peers and the possibility of a favorable marriage arrangement. It's a bit like a really intense mixer, only with more eyeliner and less awkward small talk. Before settling in for the night, you might enjoy a relaxing massage. Skilled masseuses or masseurs, depending on your preference, would knead away your stress with fragrant oils and soothing techniques. It's the perfect way to unwind after a day of such strenuous leisure activities. After all, ruling an empire is exhausting, even if you mostly just delegate. The ancient Egyptians were incredibly hygienic, at least by ancient standards. They bathed regularly, used deodorant, and even had their own version of toothpaste. So, while they may not have had Netflix, they definitely had their self-care routine down. I'm starting to think they weren't so different from us, just with more eyeliner and fewer reality TV shows. And as you drift off to sleep, surrounded by luxury and comfort, you can't help but feel a sense of contentment. You are living the good life, the noble life, the Egyptian life. You are wealthy, powerful, and pampered. What more could you possibly want? Well, maybe a slightly more comfortable pillow. And perhaps a personal chef who specializes in artisanal hummus. But other than that, you're golden. And covered in gold, probably. Of course, this idealized picture of ancient Egyptian leisure comes with a caveat. This wasn't the experience of everyone. The vast majority of the population toiled in the fields, building pyramids, or serving the elite. Their lives were far from leisurely. But for a select few, life was indeed a sun-drenched paradise of pleasure and privilege. And who knows, maybe in another life, you were one of them. Just maybe tip your servants a little better, okay? I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh yes! A joke per 1,000 words. Number 1. What did the pharaoh say when he saw a pyramid scheme? That's a monumental waste of my time. Number 2. Why did the Egyptian mummy have trouble keeping friends? Because he was too wrapped up in himself. And finally, number 3. What's an Egyptian pharaoh's favorite game to play? Raising the stakes. So, sweet dreams. Or, pleasant hieroglyphic-filled slumber. Maybe tonight you'll dream of boats on the Nile and ducks that are suspiciously good at dodging throw sticks. Okay, settle in, friends. Let's ease into this. You're standing here, just at the edge of the temple grounds. The air is thick, humid, and fragrant with, well, a lot of things. Incense, definitely. Maybe a hint of jasmine. And is that fried dough? Oh, good. Someone's got their priorities straight. You can feel the sun warming your face, maybe a little too warmly, and you realize you probably should have put on more sunscreen. Oops. Well, at least you brought that ridiculous floppy hat, right? You're surrounded by a throng of people, all moving with a kind of purposeful chaos. There are families dressed in their finest clothes, children chasing each other with shrieks of laughter, and elderly folks shuffling along with the aid of ornate wooden canes. You feel a little out of place, maybe even a lot out of place, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? Embracing the unfamiliar, leaning into the discomfort. Or, just observing quietly from the sidelines. Whatever floats your boat. The temple itself is a riot of color. Reds and golds predominate, with intricate carvings adorning every surface. You squint, trying to make sense of the swirling patterns and mythical creatures. Is that a dragon? And is it smiling? Okay. A friendly dragon. That's reassuring. You take a deep breath and follow the flow of the crowd towards the main courtyard. The sounds intensify, the chanting of monks, the clanging of bells, the murmur of prayers. It's a sensory overload, but in a strangely calming way. Like a white noise machine, but with more religious fervor. You shuffle along, trying not to bump into anyone or step on any sacred objects. Which, let's be honest, is a real challenge when you're as clumsy as you are. You almost trip over a small offering of fruit and flowers, but manage to regain your balance just in the nick of time. Close call. Maybe you should invest in some anti-gravity boots. Just a thought. You finally reach the courtyard, which is even more crowded than you imagined. People are kneeling, praying, and offering gifts to the various deities enshrined within the temple. There are statues of all shapes and sizes, each adorned with garlands of flowers and shimmering fabrics. You notice one particularly imposing figure, with multiple arms and a slightly intimidating expression. Is that Shiva? Yeah, probably Shiva. Destroyer of worlds and all that. Hope he's having a good day. Maybe you should offer him a peace offering? Like a donut? Does Shiva like donuts? Historians still argue whether ancient deities appreciated modern baked goods. You edge your way closer to the ceremony, which seems to be reaching its peak. The monks are chanting louder, the bells are ringing more insistently, and the air is thick with incense smoke. You cough, trying to clear your throat. Maybe you should have brought a gas mask. Just kidding. Mostly. You watch as people present their offerings, fruits, flowers, money, even small trinkets. Each offering is accompanied by a prayer, whispered or spoken aloud. You can't understand the words, but you can feel the sincerity behind them. It's moving, in a way that you didn't expect. Suddenly, a small child runs past you, giggling and clutching a handful of marigolds. She trips and falls, scattering the flowers across the ground. Her mother rushes to her side, scooping her up and comforting her. You watch them for a moment, struck by the simple beauty of the scene. It's a reminder that even in the midst of grand ceremonies and ancient traditions, life goes on. Children still fall, mothers still comfort, and flowers still bloom. You notice a small, elderly woman sitting on a nearby bench, watching the proceedings with a serene smile. Her face is etched with wrinkles, but her eyes are bright and clear. You feel drawn to her, like she holds some ancient wisdom that you desperately need. You consider approaching her, but then you hesitate. What would you even say? Excuse me, do you know the meaning of life? Probably not the best opening line. Instead, you simply smile at her. She returns your smile, and you feel a strange sense of connection. It's a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding. You don't need to speak. You just need to be present. The ceremony continues, and you find yourself getting swept up in the rhythm of it all. The chanting, the bells, the prayers, they all blend together into a hypnotic symphony. You close your eyes and let the sounds wash over you. You feel a sense of peace, a sense of belonging. You are part of something bigger than yourself. You open your eyes and look around. The crowd is still there, the temple is still there, but something has shifted. You feel different. Lighter, perhaps. More connected. Maybe it's just the lack of sleep, but you suspect it's something more than that. You remember reading about the concept of darshan, the act of seeing and being seen by a deity. It's believed to be a transformative experience, a way to receive blessings and connect with the divine. You wonder if that's what you just experienced. Or maybe it was just the fried dough. The main event of the festival, you overhear, is a procession through the town. Apparently, an image of the deity will be carried on an elaborately decorated chariot. Now, you know the Romans were big on chariot racing. It was a massive spectator sport in their time, influencing the political landscape and even sparking riots. But this isn't that. This is decidedly less violent. You make your way to the edge of the temple grounds, where the procession is about to begin. The chariot is enormous, adorned with flowers, flags, and glittering ornaments. It's being pulled by a team of devotees, their faces flushed with exertion and excitement. You watch as the chariot slowly rolls out of the temple grounds and into the street. The crowd cheers, the music swells, and the procession begins. You follow along, caught up in the energy of the moment. The streets are lined with people, all eager to catch a glimpse of the deity. Some are throwing flowers, some are chanting prayers, and some are simply watching in awe. You feel like you're part of something truly special, something that has been happening for centuries. Did you know that many ancient religious festivals were actually tied to the agricultural cycle? They were a way to give thanks for the harvest and to ensure a bountiful crop in the coming year. This one, you suspect, is a little more complex than that. Though, hey, good crops are always a plus, right? You keep pace with the chariot, walking alongside the devotees. The sun is beating down on you, and you're starting to sweat, but you don't care. You're too caught up in the moment to notice the discomfort. You're also starting to feel really, really hungry. That fried dough from earlier is a distant memory. As the procession winds its way through the streets, you notice a group of musicians playing traditional instruments. The music is lively and upbeat, and you find yourself tapping your foot along to the rhythm. You even attempt a little dance, but quickly realize that you have absolutely no coordination. Maybe you should stick to observing. You see a vendor selling small statues of Ganesha, the elephant-headed god of wisdom and prosperity. You remember reading that Ganesha is often invoked at the beginning of new ventures, to ensure success and remove obstacles. You consider buying one, but then you remember that you already have, like 5 Ganesha statues at home. Maybe you should open a Ganesha museum. You can call it Ganesharama. I'm here all week. According to fringe theories, and I stress theories, some believe that ancient festivals like this one were actually coded messages, passed down through generations, containing hidden knowledge about the universe. It's like the Da Vinci Code, but with more chanting and less Tom Hanks. Is that even possible? The procession eventually reaches its destination, a large open square in the center of town. The chariot is parked, and the deity is placed on a raised platform. People gather around, offering prayers and paying their respects. You watch for a while, feeling a sense of completion. The ceremony is over, but the feeling of connection lingers. You decide to take a break and find a shady spot to sit down. You're exhausted, but in a good way. You feel like you've experienced something truly meaningful, something that will stay with you long after you've left this place. You also feel like you could really use a nap. You close your eyes and take a deep breath. The sounds of the festival fade into the background, and you drift off to sleep. You dream of dragons and deities, of chanting monks and fragrant flowers. You dream of fried dough. It's a good dream. When you wake up, the sun is starting to set. The square is still crowded, but the atmosphere has changed. The ceremony is over, and people are starting to relax and socialize. You see families picnicking, friends chatting, and children playing. It's a scene of simple joy and contentment. You stand up and stretch, feeling refreshed and rejuvenated. You decide to wander around the square for a bit, soaking up the atmosphere. You buy a small souvenir, a wooden carving of a dancing Shiva, as a reminder of your experience. You also buy some more fried dough. Priorities, remember? As you walk away from the square, you can't help but smile. You came here seeking a religious experience, and you definitely got one. But you also got something more, a connection to a culture, a sense of community, and a reminder of the simple joys of life. And honestly, a lot of fried dough. You glance back at the temple, now bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. It's a beautiful sight, a testament to the enduring power of faith and tradition. You know you'll never forget this day. Alright, settle in. Let's dive head first, or perhaps sandal first, into the world of ancient Egyptian family life. You find yourself standing just outside a modest, yet sturdy, mud brick home. The sun beats down, that familiar Egyptian sun, the one that tans you in approximately 3 seconds flat. You can almost feel the grit between your toes already. You approach the door, which isn't really a door, more of a woven mat hanging in the opening. You push it aside and step inside. Instantly, the temperature drops. Smart architecture, those Egyptians. They knew a thing or two about staying cool in the desert. The air smells of dried herbs, a faint lingering scent of incense, and something earthy. It's a comforting, familiar smell, the scent of home. You see a woman, maybe in her late 30s, kneeling by a low hearth. She's grinding grain with a stone, her movements rhythmic and practiced. This would be the Nebitpur, the lady of the house. She's dressed in a simple linen sheath, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Jewelry, maybe a few colorful beads around her neck and wrists, adds a touch of elegance. "Welcome," she says, her voice warm and a little rough from the dry air. "Come, sit. You must be tired." You gratefully accept, settling onto a low stool. Now, don't expect the kind of luxurious furniture you'd find in a pharaoh's palace. This is everyday life, practical and functional. The room is sparsely furnished, a few stools, a low table, some pottery jars lining the walls. But everything is clean and well maintained. She offers you a cup of water, drawn from a clay jar that keeps it surprisingly cool. You take a sip, the water refreshing. It's amazing how much you appreciate something so simple after even a short time in the Egyptian heat. "The children will be back soon," she says, resuming her grinding. "They are helping their father in the fields today." Ah, yes, the children. You can picture them now, running through the fields, their laughter echoing in the hot air. Egyptian children, like children everywhere, probably weren't always angels, despite what the hieroglyphs might suggest. Family was the bedrock of Egyptian society. It was everything. It provided stability, support, and a sense of belonging. Marriages were usually arranged, but love matches weren't unheard of, particularly amongst the lower classes. Historians still argue whether these arranged marriages were purely pragmatic or often evolved into genuine affection. I'd put my money on a bit of both. After all, who wants to live their entire life with someone they can't stand? The man of the house, her husband, returns with the children. He is a farmer, his skin tanned and weathered from years spent working in the sun. He's wearing a simple kilt, his chest bare. He has a kind face, lined with the weariness of hard work. The children, a boy and a girl, are dusty and tired but beaming with energy. The boy, probably around 8, carries a small bundle of wheat. The girl, maybe 6, clutches a brightly colored toy, a clay animal, perhaps. He greets you warmly, then turns to his wife. "The harvest is good this year," he says, his voice filled with satisfaction. "We will have enough to eat, and some to spare." That's always good news. You can practically feel the collective sigh of relief in the room. A good harvest meant security, stability, and survival. A bad harvest, well, let's not dwell on that. The children rush to their mother, eager to show her what they've collected. She smiles, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You watch as the family interacts, their movements familiar and easy. This is the heart of Egyptian life, simple, hardworking, and deeply connected. The family meal is simple but nourishing: bread, vegetables, perhaps some fish from the Nile. They eat together, sitting on mats around a low table. The atmosphere is relaxed and convivial. You notice the absence of fancy cutlery. They eat with their fingers, scooping up the food with pieces of bread. It's all very communal, and you find yourself relaxing into the rhythm of it. The food, while not exactly Michelin star material, tastes incredible. Probably because you're starving. The family talks about their day, the work in the fields, the games they played, the latest gossip from the village. You listen, absorbing the sounds and rhythms of their lives. It's a glimpse into a world that's both ancient and surprisingly familiar. After the meal, the children help their mother clean up. Even at a young age, they are taught to contribute to the household. Children held a special place in Egyptian society. Egyptians loved kids, and images of children playing and being doted on appear frequently in tomb paintings. You get the sense that the children were involved in a number of games and activities. As dusk settles, the family gathers on the rooftop to enjoy the cool evening air. The sky is a brilliant tapestry of colors, fading from fiery orange to deep indigo. You can see the stars beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. It's really quite breathtaking. I swear, ancient Egyptians had the best sunsets. The father tells stories, myths and legends of the gods and goddesses who shaped their world. The children listen, wide-eyed, their imaginations soaring. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were the foundation of their beliefs, their values, and their understanding of the universe. It's said that Egyptians were deeply superstitious, believing in all sorts of omens and portents. For example, they believed that dreams held messages from the gods. I wonder what they'd make of our modern-day obsession with dream interpretation. Probably think we're all bonkers. You feel a sense of peace settling over you. This is a world far removed from your own, yet it feels strangely comforting. The simple rhythms of life, the strong family bonds, the connection to the land, these are things that transcend time and culture. Before you leave, the Nebiper offers you a small amulet, a symbol of protection and good fortune. You take it, feeling a surge of gratitude. It's a small, simple object, but it carries the weight of their kindness and hospitality. Historians still argue whether these amulets were believed to possess inherent power or simply acted as reminders of the gods' protection. You step back out into the night, the stars shining brightly above you. The sounds of the village fade into the distance. You carry with you the memory of this family, their warmth, their resilience, and their unwavering spirit. As you reflect on your visit, you realize that despite the millennia that separate us, human nature remains constant. We all crave connection, security, and a sense of belonging. And in the simple act of sharing a meal, telling stories, and caring for one another, we find the true meaning of life, no matter where or when we live. You know, sometimes I wish I could trade places with them, for just one day. Live that peaceful, simple life. But then I remember the lack of air conditioning, and I change my mind real quick. And as you drift off to sleep, remember that the ancient Egyptians, despite their elaborate rituals and complex beliefs, were ultimately just people, like you and me. People with families, hopes, dreams, and the occasional really bad sunburn. Sweet dreams, my friends. Sleep tight, and don't let the bed bugs, or scarab beetles, bite. Alright, settled in? Comfy? Good, because the sun's about to make its daily disappearing act, and in ancient Egypt, that was kind of a big deal. You trudge, weary from a day spent hauling water, shaping mud bricks, or maybe just strategically gossiping in the marketplace. Hey, a pharaoh's gotta know what his people are thinking, right? You feel the familiar grit of the sand between your toes as you head home, or what passes for home in your particular station of life. It could be a cozy little mud brick house, or maybe just a corner in a shared courtyard. Either way, the evening preparations are about to begin. First things first, securing the perimeter. Remember, darkness in ancient Egypt wasn't like flicking a switch. It was a proper, enveloping, potential monster-hiding darkness. So you check the door, making sure the wooden bolt slides firmly into place. Windows, if you're lucky enough to have them, are covered with thick mats or shutters. Not so much for privacy, but more for keeping out, well, everything. sand, scorpions, and any nocturnal creatures that might think your house looks like a lovely bed and breakfast. Historians still argue whether the fear of scorpions was truly rational or just a society-wide phobia. Probably both. Speaking of unwelcome guests, you might notice your neighbors starting to light small fires outside their homes. This wasn't just for cooking, it was also for warding off evil spirits. Egyptians believed the night was a time when the boundaries between the mortal world and the underworld thinned, allowing all sorts of nasty entities to pop over for a visit. Think of it as the ancient Egyptian equivalent of leaving out milk and cookies for a really grumpy, potentially lethal Santa Claus. Now about that light. As the sun dips below the horizon, plunging everything into a velvety blackness, you're gonna need some artificial illumination. Forget your fancy LED lamps. You're working with oil lamps, simple ceramic bowls filled with oil, usually derived from sesame or castor beans, and a wick made from linen. The light they provide is dim and flickering, casting long, dancing shadows that probably don't do much to calm your nerves about those lurking spirits. But hey, at least you can see your hand in front of your face. Unless you don't want to see your hand in front of your face, in which case, carry on. Mainstream historical fact. The ancient Egyptians were remarkably skilled at geometry, using it for everything from constructing the pyramids to surveying land after the annual Nile floods. They were basically the OG land surveyors. Time for dinner! You gather with your family around a low table, if you have one, or just sit on mats on the floor. Your meal might consist of bread, maybe some vegetables like onions, garlic, or lentils, and if you're lucky, a bit of fish or meat. Beer is the drink of choice for most people, brewed from barley and often flavored with dates or herbs. Egyptians were very serious about their beer. And can you blame them? Water back then wasn't exactly what you'd call refreshing. More like, refreshing adjacent. While you eat, you might tell stories, sing songs, or just listen to the sounds of the night. The chirping of crickets, the distant barking of dogs, the occasional shriek from a desert fox. It's the ancient Egyptian equivalent of Netflix and chill, minus the Netflix, the chill, and well, most of the comfort. After dinner comes the important task of personal grooming. Listen, even in ancient Egypt, personal hygiene was a thing. You might use a small bronze mirror to check your appearance, making sure your wig is properly in place. Wigs were a status symbol, you know. Women might apply makeup, using kohl eyeliner to accentuate their eyes and rouge made from ochre to add color to their cheeks. Think of it as ancient Egyptian contouring. You might also apply a generous amount of oil or ointment to your skin. The desert climate could be harsh, and these oils help to keep your skin moisturized and protected. Plus, many of these oils were scented, providing a much-needed respite from the, shall we say, rustic aromas of daily life. Quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptians sometimes slept on headrests made of wood or stone. These weren't pillows, mind you. They were more like curved supports that kept your head elevated. Historians aren't entirely sure why they used these things. Some suggest it was to protect elaborate hairstyles, while others believe it was to keep insects away from the face. Personally, I suspect it was a conspiracy by the ancient Egyptian chiropractic industry. And now, the most important part of the evening, preparing for sleep. You spread out a mat on the floor, maybe add a blanket if you have one, and get ready to drift off to dreamland. But before you close your eyes, you might say a prayer to your personal god or goddess, asking for protection during the night. Because remember those nasty spirits? They're still out there. You might also recite a spell or incantation, just to be on the safe side. Egyptians believed in the power of words, and that certain phrases could ward off evil and bring good luck. It's like the ancient Egyptian version of counting sheep, except instead of sheep, you're counting curses. Now, about those dreams. The Egyptians believed dreams were messages from the gods, offering guidance, warnings, or even glimpses into the future. So, if you had a particularly vivid dream, you might consult a dream interpreter to find out what it meant. Historians still argue whether dream interpretation was a genuine spiritual practice or just a clever way for priests to make a little extra money on the side. I'm sure it was purely for spiritual insight. And finally, you close your eyes and try to sleep. But the night is filled with sounds, the rustling of wind, the hooting of owls, the occasional blood-curdling scream from something. You try to ignore it all and focus on your breathing, hoping that the sun will rise soon and bring an end to this nightly gauntlet of potential terrors. Light joke number 1. What did the mummy say when he saw his love? I'm wrapped up in you. But wait! There's one more thing you might do before drifting off to sleep. Remember those amulets you wear around your neck? The little charms and talismans meant to protect you from harm? You might take them off and place them under your pillow, just to give them an extra boost of power. After all, you can never be too careful when it comes to warding off evil spirits. Now, with your amulets in place, your prayers said, and your spells recited, you finally allow yourself to succumb to sleep. The darkness envelopes you, and you drift off into a world of dreams, hoping that when you wake up, the sun will be shining and the monsters will have gone back to wherever they came from. One thing that's nice to imagine is that, even with these sometimes rudimentary conditions, the Egyptians loved their sleep. They had rituals around their sleep to ensure they got a good night's rest, a priority of mental health we can admire and emulate. Light joke number 2, what's an Egyptian's favorite type of music? Rap. But even as you sleep, the preparations for the night continue. Watchmen patrol the streets, their torches casting eerie shadows on the walls. Priests perform rituals in the temples, appeasing the gods and ensuring the continued protection of the city. And ordinary people like you and me dream of a better tomorrow, a tomorrow where the sun shines brightly and the monsters stay away. Think about it, despite all the challenges and uncertainties of life in ancient Egypt, people found ways to create a sense of comfort and security in their homes. They used light and fire to push back the darkness, they told stories to entertain themselves, and they practiced rituals to ward off evil spirits. In a way, they were just like us, trying to make the most of a world that can often feel scary and unpredictable. But there's one thing they had that is often missing in our culture today: rest. Ironic, isn't it, to hear that they were doing more in preparation for sleep than we modern people are? No blue light, no late-night snacking, just pure anticipation for their bodies to be rejuvenated for the next day. Historians still argue about the extent to which ancient Egyptian religion permeated every aspect of daily life. Some believe that religion was a constant and overwhelming presence, shaping every thought and action. Others argue that while religion was certainly important, people were also capable of independent thought and action, and that daily life was often driven by practical concerns. Wherever the truth lies, the amount of preparation for sleep speaks volumes about how intertwined it was with their religion. As the hours pass, the darkness begins to fade. A faint glow appears on the horizon, signaling the imminent return of the sun. Alright, come on in, come in. Kick off your shoes, loosen that belt, you're gonna need it. The smell's hitting you right now. That's a symphony of Egyptian comfort food about to explode on your taste buds. Take a seat on these cushions, they're way more comfortable than they look, promise. First things first, hibiscus tea. Deep red, slightly tart, and naturally cooling. Egyptians have been brewing variations of this stuff since forever. Some historians suggest that pharaohs were buried with it, believing it had properties that would aid them in the afterlife. Though personally, I think they just really liked hibiscus tea. I mean, wouldn't you? It's the ultimate chill-out drink, perfect for settling in after a long day of, conquering empires or just battling traffic. Alright, food is arriving. Now, before you dive in headfirst, a quick rundown. We've got full medams, stewed fava beans seasoned with cumin and olive oil, a staple breakfast dish that somehow morphed into acceptable dinner fare too. Don't knock it till you try it. Beside that, taameya, those crispy, golden orbs. They're basically Egyptian falafel, made with fava beans instead of chickpeas. Some say this gives them a unique, slightly nutty flavor. I just say they're delicious. Oh, and then there's kushari. The king. The undisputed champion of Egyptian street food. Rice, macaroni, lentils, chickpeas, tomato sauce, crispy fried onions, and a fiery chili sauce that will simultaneously make you cry and beg for more. It's a carb-loaded roller coaster of flavor and texture. Be warned, it's addictive. Historians still argue whether kushari originated as an Egyptian dish or if it was brought over by Indian soldiers during British rule. What isn't up for debate is that it's pure genius. Also on the table you see malokia, a rather unusual soup made from the leaves of the jute plant. It has a slightly slimy texture, which some people find off-putting. But the taste is rich and earthy, almost like spinach but with more depth. Trust me on this, give it a try. It's an acquired taste, like cilantro or reality television. Pile your plate high. Don't be shy. We're practically royalty tonight. And speaking of royalty, did you know that ancient Egyptians used to believe that garlic could increase strength and endurance? That's why the pyramid builders were given daily rations. So basically, every bite you take tonight is channeling the spirit of an ancient construction worker, which, frankly, is a pretty cool thought. And while you're enjoying your culinary journey through Egypt, I'll share some stories. After all, what's a good meal without a little bit of ancient mythology thrown in? Let's start with the story of Isis and Osiris. It's a classic, a real tearjerker, full of betrayal, resurrection, and some seriously questionable parenting choices. Osiris, the benevolent king, was murdered by his jealous brother Set, who chopped him into pieces and scattered them across Egypt. Charming, right? Isis, Osiris's wife, was, shall we say, not thrilled. She went on a frantic search, gathering up all the pieces of her husband, and with the help of some other deities, managed to put him back together, resurrecting him. This is where it gets weird, by the way. Historians still argue about the specifics of Osiris' resurrection, some claiming that he was only brought back to life temporarily, just long enough to, well, conceive a child with Isis. Which is exactly what happened. The child, Horus, eventually avenged his father's death and became the rightful ruler of Egypt. So, you know, a happy ending, sort of. Except for Set, obviously. And Osiris, who's stuck in the underworld for eternity. Silver linings, people. Silver linings. Now, take another bite of that tameya. Think of Isis wandering through the desert, desperately searching for her husband's, let's just say, components. See? Food tastes better with a little bit of drama. Here's another one for you. You've all heard of Cleopatra, right? Last pharaoh of Egypt, famous for her beauty, her intelligence, and her relationships with powerful Roman leaders. But did you know that Cleopatra probably wasn't actually Egyptian? Her family, the Ptolemies, were of Greek origin, descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals. So technically, she was more Greek than Egyptian. It's like ordering pizza in Italy and discovering the chef is from, I don't know, Cleveland. Also, most depictions of Cleopatra show her as this stunning beauty, a siren whose looks could launch 1,000 ships. But actual historical accounts suggest that her allure was more about her charisma and intelligence than her physical appearance. She was fluent in multiple languages, a skilled diplomat, and a shrewd politician. So basically, she was the brainy, powerful, original girl boss. Don't get me wrong, she was probably beautiful, but she likely used her intellect to gain the upper hand in life. Smart is always sexy. Moving on, remember those pyramids you've probably seen a million pictures of? The colossal structures that have stood for thousands of years, testaments to human ingenuity and backbreaking labor? Well, here's a quirky little fact. Some fringe theories suggest that the pyramids weren't actually built by Egyptians at all. That they were constructed by aliens, or a lost civilization with advanced technology. Or maybe tiny, really strong gerbils. Obviously. Mainstream historians dismiss these theories as nonsense, pointing to the abundant evidence that shows the pyramids were built by Egyptians using relatively simple tools and techniques. But the allure of a good conspiracy theory is hard to resist, isn't it? It is fun to imagine aliens hauling massive stone blocks across the desert. Just imagine the look on their little alien faces when they found out they were building tombs. Classic bait and switch. And that brings us to mummies. Ah, mummies. The bandaged stars of countless horror movies, cursed to roam the earth for eternity. The ancient Egyptians believed that preserving the body was essential for the afterlife. They painstakingly removed the internal organs, dried out the body with natron salt, and wrapped it in linen bandages. It was a long, complicated process, and you really didn't want to mess it up. A modern study using a virtual simulation found that ancient Egyptian embalmers had a precise knowledge of human anatomy, using different mummification techniques depending on the social status of the deceased. Historians still debate about the religious beliefs that underpinned mummification. Some argue that it was solely about preserving the body for the afterlife, while others believe it was also a way to purify the soul. Either way, it worked out pretty good. We are still talking about it. Want something truly weird? Some mummies were given fake noses. If the original nose was damaged during the mummification process, embalmers would fashion a new one out of linen, wood, or even clay. Talk about commitment to detail. You know, these days people are getting nose jobs to look better. Back then, they were getting them so they could make it into the afterlife looking like themselves. Though, if you think about it, isn't all cosmetic surgery just a form of modern-day mummification? Preserving the body, trying to hold on to youth and beauty for as long as possible. I'm kidding, of course. Mostly. Let's see, what else can I regale you with? Oh, how about the fact that ancient Egyptians loved board games? They played a game called Senet, which was similar to checkers or backgammon. It was so popular that it was often depicted in tombs and temples. Some Senet boards have even been found in royal tombs, suggesting that it was a game fit for pharaohs. Imagine Ramses II and Tutankhamun battling it out over a game of Senet. Oh, I see you've moved your piece there, straight to the underworld with you. Okay. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, enough with the history lessons, I'm full of koshery and ancient trivia, and I just want to relax. I get it. Me too. Let's just take a moment to soak it all in. The warmth of the air, the sounds of the city drifting in through the windows, the gentle hum of conversation. This is Egypt. A place of ancient wonders and modern marvels, of bustling cities and tranquil deserts, of delicious food and captivating stories. A place that will stay with you long after you've left. Although, before we end the session, let's check in with the time. Did you know that the ancient Egyptians were among the first to develop a 24-hour day? They divided the day into 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. They didn't have daylight savings time though, so maybe they weren't all that smart. Oh well. Also, they considered cats to be sacred. They were associated with the goddess Batet, and were believed to bring good luck to their owners. Alright, cozy creatures, settle in a little deeper. Fluff those pillows, burrow under the duvet. Tonight we're diving headfirst into the hushed world of bedtime rituals and the enigmatic realm of dreams. It's late, the moon's doing its thing, and honestly, I could use a nap. But duty calls. So let's whisper our way through centuries of nighttime routines, shall we? You trudge up the creaky stairs, the house settling around you like a contented sigh. You probably brush your teeth, maybe scroll through TikTok for just 5 minutes. We all know how that ends, and eventually, with a sigh of resignation, you slide between the sheets. But have you ever stopped to think about all the little routines, the subconscious scripts we follow every night? These aren't just about hygiene and comfort. They're about preparing our minds for the great unknown. Centuries ago, your evening might have looked quite different. Before electric lights, evenings stretched long and dark, punctuated only by the flickering glow of candles or the crackling hearth. Can you imagine? Boredom levels would be off the charts. The concept of Netflix and chill would involve, like, staring intensely at a burning log. People would huddle together, sharing stories and engaging in communal rituals to ward off the darkness, both literal and metaphorical. Now, picture this. In medieval Europe, it wasn't uncommon for people to share beds, not necessarily out of some scandalous intent, but simply because beds were expensive and space was limited. Think of it as the original Airbnb, but without the glowing reviews and questionable hygiene. But imagine trying to say your prayers with your roommate snoring like a chainsaw next to you. Good luck achieving enlightenment in that environment. One common bedtime ritual, stretching back millennia, is prayer. Before drifting off to sleep, many cultures have incorporated prayers or invocations into their nighttime routines. These weren't just rote repetitions. They were often deeply personal conversations with the divine, a way to seek protection, forgiveness, and guidance during the vulnerable hours of sleep. You might kneel by your bedside, clasping your hands, and whispering your intentions into the quiet room. Or perhaps you prefer a silent meditation, clearing your mind and focusing on gratitude for the day. It's interesting to think that for centuries, countless individuals have performed these same actions, connecting to something larger than themselves before surrendering to slumber. Mainstream historical fact coming at you: the practice of formal bedtime prayers is deeply rooted in many religions, including Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. These religions often prescribe specific prayers or passages to be recited before sleep, offering comfort and a sense of spiritual well-being. The Shema Yisrael, a central Jewish prayer affirming monotheism, is often recited before bed, while Christians might say the Lord's Prayer or a personalized prayer for protection. Think of it as a spiritual lullaby, sung to generations. But here's a quirky tidbit. In some cultures, people believed that evil spirits were particularly active during the night. To protect themselves, they might place objects under their pillows, such as garlic cloves or iron tools, believed to have warding properties. Basically, they were arming themselves for a spiritual pillow fight. Sleep tight, don't let the demons bite. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these bedtime rituals was purely spiritual, or if they also served a psychological function, providing a sense of control and security in a world filled with uncertainties. Did they genuinely believe they were warding off evil spirits, or were they simply creating a comforting routine that helped them relax and fall asleep easier? Probably a little of column A, little of column B, you know? Speaking of warding off evil, let's tiptoe into the shadowy landscape of dreams. For as long as humans have been sleeping, they've been trying to unravel the mysteries of their dreams. Are they random firings of neurons, meaningless blips in the brain's electrical activity? Or are they glimpses into another reality, messages from the subconscious, or even visitations from the spirit world? Think back to your own dreams. Have you ever had one so vivid, so real, that you woke up feeling disoriented, unsure if it actually happened? Or maybe you've experienced the classic nightmare, chased by shadowy figures through endless corridors, waking up in a cold sweat, heart pounding in your chest. Dreams can be bizarre, beautiful, terrifying, and utterly nonsensical. In ancient civilizations, dreams were often considered prophetic. The Egyptians, for example, meticulously recorded their dreams and consulted dream interpreters to decipher their hidden meanings. Pharaohs would make crucial decisions based on the counsel gleaned from their nighttime visions. Can you imagine running a country based on what you dreamt about after eating too much cheese? Okay, guys, the talking giraffe told me to invade Nubia tomorrow. Pack your bags. You toss and turn, the images of the day swirling behind your eyelids. You might dream of falling, of flying, of showing up to school naked. Freud would have a field day with that last one. Dreams, in his view, were the royal road to the unconscious, a way for our repressed desires and anxieties to bubble to the surface. Modern sleep science offers a more biological explanation. During REM, rapid eye movement sleep, your brain is highly active, and your body is essentially paralyzed. This is when most vivid dreams occur. Scientists believe that dreams may play a role in consolidating memories, processing emotions, and even problem-solving. So, next time you have a particularly strange dream, maybe your brain is just sorting through the day's data, like a hyperactive librarian cataloging overdue books. Here's that historical fact: the interpretation of dreams has a long and fascinating history. One of the most famous dream manuals is the Onira Critica, written by Artemidorus of Daldis in the 2nd century AD. This comprehensive guide attempted to categorize and interpret various dream symbols, offering insights into their potential meanings. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of Google Dream Decoder, except without the annoying pop-up ads. Time for a quirky tidbit. Some indigenous cultures believe that dreams are a way to communicate with ancestors or spirits. In these traditions, dreams are not just personal experiences but also a connection to a larger spiritual reality. Dreaming of a deceased relative might be interpreted as a sign of guidance or protection, a comforting reminder that you're not alone on your journey. Imagine having your grandma as your personal dream coach. Alright, sweetie, remember to invest in low-risk bonds and always wear clean underwear. You never know who you'll meet. Historians still argue whether dreams are purely subjective experiences or if they hold universal symbolic meanings. Jung believed in the concept of the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of archetypal images and symbols that are present in all human minds. According to this view, certain dream symbols, such as the snake or the shadow, might have similar meanings across cultures and throughout history. But is it just coincidence, or something more profound? The debate continues. You adjust your position, pulling the covers a little higher. Maybe you're one of those people who keeps a dream journal, meticulously recording every bizarre detail in an attempt to decipher its hidden meaning. Or maybe you're more the wake up and forget it ever happened type. Either way, dreams are an undeniable part of the human experience, a nightly journey into the uncharted territories of the mind. I've got one light joke for you that should get a small chuckle. Why did the bicycle fall over? Because it was too tired. Before we completely succumb to the Sandman's gentle embrace, let's consider the power of intention. Just as bedtime rituals can prepare your mind for sleep, setting an intention before drifting off can influence your dreams and your waking life. Before you close your eyes, take a moment to visualize what you want to achieve, what you want to experience, or what you want to let go of. It's like planting a seed in the fertile ground of your subconscious, hoping that it will blossom into something beautiful. I am getting tired just thinking about it. So, there you have it. A quick, whispering journey through the world of bedtime rituals and the strange and wonderful realm of dreams. May your night be filled with restful slumber, and may your dreams be, well, whatever they want to be. It's their party after all. Just try to avoid the naked at school scenario, okay? Alright, settle in, friend. Pull up a mental cushion, maybe dim the lights. We're diving deep tonight, not into water, thankfully, but into something just as profound. We're going to contemplate death, the ancient Egyptian way. Yes, that death. The one that makes us all eventually equal parts dust and existential dread. So relax, breathe, and let's unravel this whole mummy-wrapped mystery together. You find yourself standing on the banks of the Nile, not quite sure how you got there, honestly. It's hot, the air thick with the smell of papyrus and, well, let's just say the ancient Egyptians weren't exactly renowned for their sophisticated plumbing. You see boats gliding along, carrying goods, people, and occasionally, elaborately decorated coffins. It's these coffins that catch your attention. They're not just boxes, they're miniature houses for the deceased, promising passage to a better, sand-free existence. This, friend, is the doorway to the afterlife, according to the ancient Egyptians. And trust me, they had a lot to say about it. You trudge along, the sand crunching under your sandals, or whatever hypothetical footwear you're currently sporting. You hear the chanting of priests in the distance, preparing the dead for their grand voyage. It's quite the process, really. First, you have to remove all the organs, except the heart, because, feelings. Then, you stuff the body with natron, a naturally occurring salt, to dry it out. It's like making beef jerky, but human jerky. Then, you wrap the whole thing in linen bandages, layer upon layer, until it resembles a slightly lumpy, very quiet burrito. Modern forensic scientists have even used Egyptian mummification techniques on recently deceased bodies to study the process in detail. Talk about dedication. The ancient Egyptians believed that after death, you embarked on a perilous journey through the underworld, called the Duat. This was no walk in the park. You had to navigate treacherous landscapes, battle monstrous creatures, and outsmart cunning demons. Think of it as the world's first escape room, but with eternal consequences. To help you on your way, you were buried with all sorts of goodies, food, weapons, furniture, even board games. Because, you might get bored in the afterlife. Historians still argue whether these grave goods were purely symbolic or intended for actual use. Were they expecting the deceased to sit around playing Senate with Anubis? One can only imagine. One of the most crucial parts of the journey was the weighing of the heart ceremony. This is where things got really interesting. Your heart, the seat of your soul, was placed on one side of a scale, and a feather, representing Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice, was placed on the other. If your heart was lighter than the feather, congratulations. You were worthy of entering the afterlife. But if your heart was heavier, weighed down by sin and wickedness, well, let's just say you were in for a bad time. A creature called Ammit, a delightful combination of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, would devour your heart, condemning you to oblivion. So, basically, don't be a jerk in life, or you'll become Hippocroc Chow. Now, here's where it gets a little weird. There's evidence suggesting that some ancient Egyptians tried to cheat the system. They would bury themselves with amulets and spells designed to manipulate the weighing of the heart ceremony. Basically, they were trying to bribe the gods. Good luck with that. Some scholars even believe that the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and prayers, was essentially a cheat sheet for navigating the underworld. It's like having a spiritual GPS, guiding you through the perils of the afterlife. You continue your journey, now imagining yourself in the Duat, battling serpent-like creatures and dodging fire-breathing demons. It's exhausting, frankly. You're starting to appreciate the appeal of just ceasing to exist. But then you remember the reward, eternal life in the field of reeds, a paradise where everything is perfect, and you can spend your days farming and relaxing. The field of reeds was essentially a mirror image of the earthly world, but without all the annoying things, like taxes and traffic jams. You can see why they were so keen on getting there. Historians still debate the exact location of the field of reeds. Some believe it was a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, while others think it was a literal place in the afterlife. Maybe it's somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle? The level of detail the ancient Egyptians went into describing the afterlife is staggering. They had a god for everything, from embalming to weighing hearts. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, was a particularly busy fellow. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, kept meticulous records of everything that happened in the underworld. And Osiris, the god of the dead, presided over the whole shebang. He was the ultimate judge, jury, and executioner. I'd hate to have him on jury duty. You pause, taking a deep breath. You're starting to feel a little mummified yourself. All this talk of death and the afterlife can be a bit much, can it? But there's something strangely comforting about it too. The ancient Egyptians faced their mortality head-on. They didn't shy away from death. They embraced it, prepared for it, and even tried to outsmart it. They believed that death was not the end, but a transition to a new, hopefully better, existence. And while their beliefs might seem a bit bizarre to us today, they offer a valuable lesson, that life is precious, and we should make the most of it while we can. So go out there, live your life to the fullest, and try not to accumulate too much Hippocroc food on your heart. After all, nobody wants to be Ammit's afternoon snack. The ancient Egyptians clearly believed in life after death. There is also a fringe belief in the existence of an ancient advanced civilization that predates even the Egyptians, that taught them their religious beliefs. You realize that you are starting to feel a little sleepy. All this talk of death and gods and scales and Hippocroc monsters, it's surprisingly exhausting. It's time to slowly return from our mental journey back to the familiar comfort of your own space. Let's ease out of that dusty, sandy realm, shall we? We'll leave behind the chanting priests, the carefully wrapped mummies, and the terrifying Ammit. Breathe in deeply, and slowly exhale. Let the tension melt away from your shoulders, your jaw, and your mind. Remember those sun-drenched banks of the Nile? Picture them fading into the distance. The sounds of the ancient world soften, the hustle and bustle of daily life diminishes, and a gentle calmness washes over you. The image of the field of reeds, that idyllic paradise, begins to dissipate. The vibrant colors fade, and the details blur, leaving behind a sense of peace and tranquility. Imagine yourself floating on a soft, fluffy cloud, carried by a gentle breeze. There's no need to think, no need to worry, no need to do anything at all. Just drift, and let go. Your breath becomes slow and deep, a gentle rhythm that lulls you further and further into relaxation. Every inhale brings a sense of calm, and every exhale releases any remaining tension. The world around you fades into a soft, hazy dreamscape, Colors soften, sounds diminish, and all that remains is a feeling of profound peace and serenity. Allow yourself to drift deeper and deeper into this state of blissful relaxation. There is nothing to fear, nothing to worry about, and nothing to do but surrender to the soothing embrace of sleep. As you continue to drift, the images, the sounds, everything fades gently, peacefully, into a quiet darkness. Sweet dreams.